So once again, thank you for having us. It's a great opportunity to talk about our research and former work at the intersection of superdiversity and higher education. And I will be presenting with my colleague Birce today. We will first start with UNIC superdiversity and what it means to have a super diversity-friendly outlook towards higher education. And then we will both present from our recent research, which in a way speaks to the themes we're talking about. So as you might have learned already, we are members of a consortium named European University of Cities in Post-Industrial Transition. This is one of the important internationalization projects of the European Commission under Erasmus+. Universities establish consortia and address certain challenges within their locality, as well as global ones. And each consortia, in a way, has a theme, a few themes sometimes to focus on and address with their educational capacities, research capacities, but as well as societal impact related work. And what in a way defines our consortium, UNIC, is post-industrialism and also superdiversity. Those are the two main themes we have been working on. And as you see on the screen, these are some of the challenges and realities that all our universities in a way have been facing. Post-industrial cities and transformation experiences differences in employment patterns, transformation in employment patterns, migration-related diversities. We experience the impact of new technologies, health-related challenges, as well as environmental challenges. This is not an exhaustive list, of course. It can be extended, and it's a very dynamic one. And superdiversity is a reality for these societies, for our institutions. We have more non-traditional students on our campuses, first-generation students, as well as students with migration backgrounds. And what also defines our consortium is the importance of cooperation with and for cities. So we are, and when I say we, it includes all the stakeholders in a university environment. We're all agents of change: students, faculty members, administrative staff members, researchers. So and we need to be in a way working with different societal partners towards addressing challenges. And what we mean by actually having this super diverse look towards higher education, it's actually going beyond urban settings and immigrant groups, and in a way implementing the concept to our institutions. And where our institutions are situated. And it's, as the literature on superdiversity suggests, it's important to consider the spread, speed, and scale of diversity that affects our institutions. It's very important to take a multidimensional and multi-layered approach because there's this complexity of identities, at times overlapping, and multiplicity of relations and interactions between different actors. So we believe it's very important and productive to develop this super diverse approach towards higher education. And for that purpose, in the beginning of our alliance, the initial stages, my colleagues, one of them being Birce Demiryontar, and we have Birce Altıok and also Suat Oseyran, who co-authored a report, a state-of-the-art report on superdiversity and higher education. And today, in the upcoming few slides, my colleague Birce will talk about this report very briefly and explain what were some of the issues and their, in a way, recommendations to higher education institutions. So it's when we talk about diversity in higher education, it's important to consider two main issues. One is, in a way, how superdiversity challenges our institutional structures in different ways. This can be related to, of course, student populations, staff populations, teaching, impact, so research. So we need to take a holistic approach here. And the second one is what innovative practices address these challenges in the higher education settings. And in a way, the state-of-the-art report that my colleagues authored offers some clues as to the answers of these two questions. And now I hand over to my colleague Birce. Thank you, Birce.
Thank you, Esin. So when we were writing the report, we saw two types of theoretical extensions of superdiversity in the academia. So the main frameworks that needed to be considered were first intersectionality, so that it began as the term was coined as a view to explain Black feminism. So the main idea was that the Black women were experienced discrimination differently from other women in the society, but then it became as this term like covering all overlapping systems of oppression, race, gender, migration status, to shape your experiences in life, and in the context of superdiversity that shaped your educational experiences. And the second framework that used was the mobility paradigm. So how internationalization of education would link to migration governance in the countries and migration diplomacy of the countries as well. So what we saw here, superdiversity was very valuable as a multidimensional analytical lens to be used in the analysis of our higher education institutions and how they respond to student diversity, and its application to policymaking in education would end up in creative and good results for migrants and minority students as well. Can we go to the second one, please? By the way, my screen is a bit weird. Sorry about that. Okay, it should be okay now. So then we asked our UNIC institutions about what they thought of superdiversity, what they think the identity markers of superdiversity were in their university. And we saw that, while most of them considered, ethnic minority and migrant background to be as parts of superdiversity, not many of them considered gender, because they thought that, there wasn't much gender-related discrimination related with their institutions. Many of them responded as disability as well. For a long time, diversity is considered within the framework of disabilities in the universities. So that is why many stated disabilities as well. And as you can see in the part here, as you can see in the table here, back then we had only 8 universities in our alliance, so it's only 8 universities. but you can see from in Bochum, for instance, they answered ethnic minority, refugees, and socioeconomic first generation, while they didn't think of the other stuff. While it changes, for instance, in University of Liège, they didn't consider mature status as being an identity marker, a super diverse identity marker in their institution. Can we go to the other one, please? Yes. So what we saw happening in our 8 universities back then, there were some institutional practices based on super diversity and inclusion, but it was very much directed at needs-based support. So when you would go to those offices, go to your diversity officers with a need, they would provide you with an ad hoc solution, but there wasn't a top-down university-wide policy related to diversity and inclusion. And they were mostly related to positive action and non-discrimination, mostly towards women, while most of them considered gender was not a super diversity trait. Gender was not a trait for discrimination in their institutions. We saw that most of the action related to non-discrimination was based on gender non-discrimination. So this was a kind of a duality in our UNIC institutions, where they, didn't consider women as being discriminated, but most of their policies on non-discrimination were based on gender disparities. And then they have some policies on reducing structural barriers to access to higher education. It is mostly based on the issue of socioeconomic first generation students, coming to their universities. And many of our universities have an awareness and trainings on inclusivity in learning and teaching and research. So they have these awareness building programs. They have these, teaching institutions within the universities to increase awareness of inclusivity in learning and teaching. So we can go to the next one. But the main problem was, while all of these universities had a kind of super diverse university populations, student populations, and students had, complex identities based on these intersectionality. Their identities were multidimensional. They weren't, unidimensional. Their needs were rapidly changing, and they had very much activist mindsets. But the institutional strategies that try to implement, policies to meet the needs of the students, they were very much based on single-dimensional identity markers. For instance, they would think of gender, they would think of minority background, or they would think of refugee background, but they wouldn't be able to approach the issues intersectionality based on the multidimensional and complex identities of the students. And their policy responses were extremely slow. So as the students' needs were rapidly changing, the policy responses of the universities were both ad hoc and also extremely slow. And also, the institutional strategies were mostly based on identity politics, which tried to define who the students are based on these overly aged identity politics. So although the universities had a mission and the potential to act as agents of change for societal transformation, for instance, the universities were expected to guide the change in their cities. They weren't able to do that due to this gap between the students' expectations and students' reality and institutional strategies, kind of age-old mechanisms, I would say. Can we go to the next one, please? So what we found out from the case studies in our universities, in the UNIC institutions, there was an extreme disconnection between institutional inclusion rhetoric and operational practices. There was an over-reliance on internationalization as a marker of diversity. So when we asked what was diversity in the universities. Many of them focused on international students, and many diversity offices and diversity related practices in the universities are undertaken under the offices of international programs or offices of Erasmus offices, etc. So there is still marginalization in super diverse settings. There are many intersectional exclusions based on, socioeconomic status, meeting with ethnicity, meeting with lack of knowledge of the majority language. And we see that in universities, superdiversity has a very big risk of becoming a superficial narrative without any structural change. So when I mentioned we want superdiversity to be seen as a theoretical lens, as a way to approach our diverse student populations, because many universities tend to see superdiversity as a way to define diversity in their institutions when we ask them, but they don't see it as a way to implement policies in their institutions. They don't see it in a way to implement intersectionalities in their institutions. So that is how we see superdiversity is in the risk of becoming a kind of this token term, a popular term, a superficial narrative without implementing any structural change in our universities. And we see that in an extreme manner in the case of Turkey, So the name of the country has recently changed to Turkey. That's why I'm using that. So what happens is in Turkey is that diversity in universities, again, is very much superficially understood as a way to respond to increasing foreign student population in the country. And they can't even, they are not even good, they're not even sufficient in meeting the foreign students' needs, let alone to meet the needs of other diverse populations. So we have recently finished this project. It's a nationally funded project titled Foreign Students in Turkish Higher Education Space. So we looked into Turkish higher education space from a lot of perspectives, but here what I'm going to talk to you, can we go to the next one, please? What I'm going to be talking to you is mostly the institutional practices or lack thereof. So as you can see from this graph, Turkey has a big policy on increasing the number of international students enrolled in the universities. So it is a state-based policy. So the state has this pressure actually on universities to increase their, international students body. And it has been increasing since 2014. So in 2023, now we have around 330,000 international students enrolled in Turkish universities. Can we go to the next one, please? So when we tried to implement this project, we had an idea on to look into this quantitative increase in internationalism policies and whether this quantitative increase would reflect on the qualitative framework in policymaking processes in the universities. So we looked into the institutional policies and student expectations. We looked into the priorities of foreign students and institutions. We tried to map the current situation, and we tried to look into the national and international structures and policies of institutions, as well as student expectations. So there we have a three-level analysis, which looks to the interrelationships between the actors, institutions, and structures in Turkish in Turkish higher education space. The next one, please. To briefly talk about our methodology, here we have we talked with 17 higher education institutions relevant offices. We had 35 interviews with the relevant offices. We talked to some universities in our European network as well, and we talked with the foreign students enrolled in selected higher education institutions in Turkey. Then we had a quantitative survey which directed towards international students, which included 353 complete responses in methodology. So I want to talk to you about what universities have been doing, because that is what we are, talking about today. So we saw that there were some paths to inclusion. There were some supportive policies, scholarships and financial aid to reduce economic barriers. There were some social integration events to encourage cross-cultural interactions, mostly like picnics or that kind of international student dates, etc. And there were some emotional and academic support to international students, some psychological counseling services. There were some partnerships with NGOs to increase the institutional capacities to grant tailored support to international students. However, there were some, can we go, Esin? There were some institutional practices which would perpetuate exclusion as well. There were some systematic barriers that universities were unable to overcome, complex bureaucracy in enrollment processes, inconsistent recognition of prior qualifications, and challenges in academic adaptation due to unfamiliar Turkish academic norms. Many international students didn't know how to approach to their professors, how to approach to even the academic staff, but also to administrative staff as well. And there were some social exclusionary practices because the universities weren't able to ensure peer interactions would happen that would foster alienation in the universities. And there were some lack of awareness about students' unique struggles. For instance, the faculty just saw Syrian refugee students as regular international students. They were unable to comprehend the intersectionalities related with their experiences, which would entail, being a refugee, being a student, and being in permanent temporariness in Turkey. Can we go, please? And some of our key findings that would be as recommendations to international offices was that, institutionalization and professionalization of international offices were critical. Many state universities in Turkey lacked adequate staffing and resources for these offices, and personnel was very much overburdened, and they would handle multiple roles as, academics, as teachers, as international office representatives, and it was really hard for them to implement sustainable operations. And we had some recommendations which would begin with dedicated staffing. So we need staff training in diversity and inclusion. And there is very little bilingual academic and emotional support systems. So we need to increase them. We need to employ full-time personnel for focused and professional support, and allocation of the resources is an important issue in both, actually not only in Turkish universities but in our UNIC universities as well. We need to have some structural reforms, to redefining their authority, and to facilitate more effective handling of the key processes every international student would see, such as residency, credential recognition of credits that are coming from their previous institutions, and support in their graduation. And thank you for listening to our this part of our research. I give the floor to Esin back. Thank you, Esin.
Thank you. Thank you, Birce. I know this was a great overview. I know the project is very comprehensive, detailed. So you provided a great, summary of what you have explored. And I will be talking about my nationally funded research project, which was on the internationalization and inclusivity of the higher education curricula in Turkey. This has also been recently finished. Now I'm in the reporting phase of it. So, let me start by talking about why I decided to focus on this topic, why this study. Firstly, as Birce also mentioned, internationalization agenda of the Turkish higher ed is a fact, and there are strategic plans at different level, the higher education authority, individual institutions, which also demand, increased efforts in scope and size. So, well, maybe a decade ago, it used to be more of the Erasmus program, and now it's the international students recruitment we're talking about, and joint programs. So there's diversity, at least aimed. Diversity, let's say. There are former studies that focus on the outcomes of the mobility experience from the perspective of students and faculty members. There's work on Bologna process assessment at the macro level, what it has achieved, what not in the country, and also some studies on Erasmus and system level change it brought. However, curriculum aspects has been missing. And there is the need for policies focusing on quality rather than quantity. So the Turkish higher ed, when it comes to internationalization, it has been, predominantly focusing on the quantity, number of agreements, number of students, number of staff, etc. But for real impact, we should be talking about quality, and when we, of course, educational quality is an important component of that. Well, social dimension of the Bologna process has been less clear, many-sided and context-dependent, and as we know, inclusivity and internationalization is closely tied to the social dimension. With that in mind, I thought it would be very important to consider debates on the social dimension. Of course, increased importance of internationalization at home. This literature has also been growing since the 1990s, late 1990s, because not every student can benefit from international experiences, physical ones, so to say. And there's this increased number of international students in the country, which makes it, really important to focus on what we do at home for inclusivity and internationalization. And as many stakeholders emphasize, there's this growing emphasis on global competence, and an international and inclusive curriculum closely relates to this fact. And the three research questions I had at the start of this journey: what do different types of universities understand from curriculum internationalization and inclusivity? How are curriculum-related work carried out? Who is active at different stages and levels? What kind of international standards and resources are taken into consideration while doing the curriculum-related work? And what kind of experience do individual faculty members experience? How do they get prepared? Who they work with? And what do they implement? There were two strands of literature that guided my study. One was on the internationalization of the curriculum. The views vary from more activity-based approaches towards more competence-based ones. I would like to refer to a definition provided by one of the leading scholars in this field, Lees. A curriculum with an international orientation in both content and form prepares students for professional and social environments that are international and multicultural, and it's for both local and international students. So I would like to draw your attention to the content and form part. So it's not just content, but also the ways in which a content is actually being conveyed to students. And with students, most probably, and also the fact that it's for both local and international students. What I tried to do was to approach the issue from a more comprehensive look. So I didn't only focus on the content, but try to focus on the processes of curriculum development, content of the course, and also extracurricular learning opportunities, which in a way complement the formal curriculum, of course. So I posed questions that would, in a way, cover all these aspects. And one other, of course, important literature has been this. I'm sure some of you have heard about this literature, or maybe even studied culturally responsive pedagogy. In a way, it refers to understanding and integrating students' backgrounds and lived experiences in the teaching learning process. And it also emphasized the importance of the competence of teaching staff in terms of being aware of their own individual characteristics, being appropriate facilitators, and also creating suitable program content that would speak to students coming from different backgrounds and all walks of life. And there's this really emphasis on creating a learning community and establishing meaningful theory-practice relationships, which comes up during my interviews. I will discuss in a few slides. So research design and tools, just to give an overview, it was a qualitative research design, and I had focus groups or individual semi-structured interviews with the students via digital platforms, Zoom or Teams. I had semi-structured interviews with faculty members. Students and faculty members were from different fields, disciplines, as you see on the table. Faculty members' seniority also varied, full professors, associate professors, and assistant professors, and students were mostly third and fourth grade students, which I think proved to be helpful because they had experienced the university environment for a few years, so they had some solid experience. I included 15 universities, 10 public and 5 foundation. Foundation university means private university in Turkey because only foundations can establish private universities. So it may be useful to provide this explanation. And universities were from all geographical regions, 9 provinces established between 1950s and 200s. That was an intentional, of course, move on my side to be able to hear from different universities with different orientations. The study did not only include interviews. I also looked at quality agency reports of the universities and hired our educational authorities, monitoring numbers in terms of internationalization and inclusivity, to be able to reflect, many-sided approach from governance to student experiences, as well as academic programming and experience of the faculty members. And what I tried to do was to, in a way, detect patterns, mutual topics, and also points of differentiation. If I were to sum up student interviews and explain what came up, Language was a strong reality. Language issues was a strong reality, both for local students and international students. For local students, they were complaining about the fact that they don't have the language proficiency to study abroad or to follow up on international literature, for instance, because they were predominantly taught in the Turkish programs. But they were still seeing the need to progress on this. And for international students, it's especially for those who are accepted to the English language programs, they were complaining that the local students were forcing faculty members to teach in Turkish, not English, even if the program was English. So there was this tension between the students and also students who were accepted to Turkish programs, let's say to study sociology in Turkish. Students did not have the required proficiency in the language. So this was these were raised as important issues, and it matched with what faculty members also reflected. Students were also reflecting on the fact that sometimes they were not having access to certain courses, instructors with expertise that they needed, especially in some niche fields, and their suggestion here was being able to take courses from different institutions in the country and outside of the country to be able to fill that gap, which in a way here emphasized the importance of virtual exchange opportunities. And they were talking about structural inadequacies and access issues on campus, and especially in class, and also in terms of housing. Though housing is an overall issue, I think, in different geographies, but these are important issues here in Turkey as well, and it seems not directly related to the teaching practice, but there are important underlying issues. And there was demand on practice-oriented and societal engagement courses. They were really looking for small-sized classes where they can have interaction, and more integration with different sectors and parts of the society. And lack of funding and administrative support for extracurricular learning opportunities also came up as an important issue. And when we look at faculty member interviews, we see that how they conceptualize this curriculum internationalization inclusivity is usually one-sided, and there's some awareness about few aspects. It very much depends on their former experience, or sometimes, if they're, let's say, experts in the field or these themes of diversity, inclusion, they are of course more aware. But even if they're aware, they talk about the structural problems and, for instance, high number of students or students' background. Not being ready for higher education and taking such courses. So those were some of the issues they emphasized, and it depends on individual awareness and interest and experience and non-systematic processes at the institutions really to deal with curriculum internationalization and inclusivity. And as I said, they talk about issues regarding preparedness of students, language problems, lack of global competencies, life skills, Language was an important issue, as I described. Faculty members sometimes state that some disciplines are more prone to be inclusive and international, like engineering, social sciences, medicine, and business. Though there were others who also emphasized there are different ways in which actually, we can implement this and we can experience change. And importance of applied and research-oriented courses, as well as interdisciplinary education, was commonly emphasized by the faculty members. And when we look at the quality agency reports and sub-monitoring numbers, I will go through the few ones that I didn't mention before. Lack of systematic diversity and inclusion policies and practices, including curriculum-related aspects. And there's limited understanding of disadvantaged, vulnerable groups. There's this, as Birce mentioned in her presentation, there's more emphasis on needs-based approach in terms of disabilities, in need of scholarships, international students, but actually there's also diversity within each group. For instance, international student body is also very diverse, and we can't talk about, very homogeneous, implementations in that sense. And even measures taken at the disabled student units are very limited. And there's no direct recognition on the internationalization of the curriculum within the scope of internationalization policy. And a few words on findings, discussion. The internationalization inclusivity of the curriculum is not considered in an institutional, multidimensional, systematic way, very much relies on more individual efforts and interest at different types of universities. We need strategic planning and leadership, really, to get things going on this topics. While macro processes like Bologna process, international or national accreditation can be important to internationalize and increase the inclusivity, but also they are not sufficient. You can tick the requirements of accreditation processes, but still, they may not be enough to have an inclusive and international curriculum. It's important to support students from different backgrounds, experiences, and requires comprehensive, multifaceted practices. Faculty members should not be alone by themselves. They should be working closely with different units within the university, like teaching offices, international offices, diversity inclusion offices, to address the needs. Identifying, addressing structural problems is critical. As I said, issues that might seem administrative, logistical, can seriously impact education. And good practices should be shared more systematically, frequently, especially within institutions, but also across institutions and regions. We really need learning from each other. We need learning communities, flexible, guiding each other. And campus-related work needs to be addressed more systematically. And language emerges as an important issue, and maybe in relation to having multilingualism policies and implementations, and different university structures really should consider based on needs and possibilities, of course. And overall conclusions towards inclusive and intersectional higher education, from considering both our projects, what I explained, and also my colleague Birce explained in terms of policy recommendations. It's important to integrate the notion of superdiversity, this multi-layered approach, multidimensional approach into the institutional habitus to address systematic barriers and change. We should also invest in diversity beyond metrics. So numbers, of course, show something. It's important, but we should empower student voices. We should strengthen student participation, and also more of bottom-up approaches to have the policy implementations in place. And also, I think monitoring here is very important, constant monitoring. And critical reflection, I think we can also tie that up to monitoring. Inclusion must extend to structural reforms and not just programmatic changes, and we should accept that it's a dynamic process, an ongoing process with the participation of different stakeholders. So thank you for listening to us.